Okay, Britton, are we ready to get started? Okay, so right now I do not see Art Browner. So we have Commissioner McCabe as our alternate for this evening. Everybody good with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening. The time is 6:00 p.m. and I would like to welcome everyone to our meeting of the City of Georgetown Historic and Architectural Review Commission. The Historic and Architectural Review Commission, appointed by the Mayor and City Council, is responsible for hearing and taking final action on applications for certificates of appropriateness based upon the City Council adopted Downtown and Old Town Design Guidelines and the Unified Development Code. This virtual meeting format is different from the regular meetings at City Hall, but we will still follow a similar meeting format. We will consider the cases scheduled for this meeting individually as follows. Staff will make a presentation of the case, and then I will give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions to staff. After the staff presentation, the applicant or their representative will have up to 10 minutes to present or provide comments on their project if they choose, followed by questions from the commissioners. Once staff and the applicant have addressed questions from the commissioners, we will open the meeting for the public hearing. If you would like to provide comments on the agenda item, please wait until I open the public hearing. When I open the public hearing, I will ask if anyone would like to speak. And if you would, please unmute yourself by pressing *6 or unmute yourself on the computer and state your name. Once we have the name of everyone who would like to speak, I will call the names in order. When your name is called, you will have up to 3 minutes. A speaker may allot their time to another speaker for a maximum of 6 minutes. If you wish to allot your time to another speaker, please indicate so when I open the public hearing. Please remember that all comments and questions must be addressed to the commission, and please be patient while we organize the speakers during the public hearing portion. You also have the opportunity to provide comments through the Q&A section of the live meeting located on the right hand of your screen. Please provide your full name and address for the record, and your comment will be read by staff. After everyone who has asked to speak has spoken, I will close the public hearing and provide a few minutes of rebuttal time to the applicant if they so choose. Following this set of questions, I will ask the commissioners for a motion and a second, followed by deliberation and any additional questions to staff or to the applicant. Then I will call for a vote on the motion. If the applicant or a member of public has questions or concerns following a vote on an agenda item, please communicate those to the recording secretary outside of this meeting so that staff can follow up with you. You can provide your contact information through the Q&A section and request follow-up. You can call the planning department at 512-930-3575, or you can email historic@georgetown.org. I would like to remind everyone to please state your name before you make any comments. That includes staff, commissioners, applicants, and members of the public who speak during the public comment portion of the meeting. If you are a member of the public, please also provide your address. The first item on the agenda is item C, consideration and possible action to approve the minutes from the July 23rd, 2020 regular meeting of the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. Do I have any edits or changes to the minutes?
This is Steve. I move for approval.
Thank you, Steve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is that Catherine? Okay, thank you. So I have a motion to approve the minutes as written. All in favor? I will call names. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Hyde?
Approve.
Commissioner Curry?
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston?
Yes.
Commissioner Morales?
Approve.
Commissioner Nunn?
Approve.
And Commissioner McCabe?
Approve.
Thank you. That motion carries. Item D. This is a COA 2020-34 COA. I will turn it over to Britton.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this Thursday evening. Can y'all see, if you would verify for me that you can see the beginning slide for this project?
I can.
Yes.
Yes, Steve.
All right, I'll get started. It's always good to make sure that we actually shared the presentation that we intended to. We found that sometimes it doesn't happen quite the right way. So this is at 1610 South Church Street. It's a garage addition. And the caption is, this is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition to a street-facing facade, a 5-foot 4-inch setback encroachment into the required 25-foot street-facing garage setback to allow a residential structure 19 feet 8 inches from the side street or south property line, a 4-foot 6-inch setback encroachment into the required 10-foot rear or west setback to allow a residential structure 5 feet 6 inches from the rear west property line, a 2-foot 9-inch setback encroachment into the required 6-foot side or north setback for lot 5 to allow a residential structure 3 feet 3 inches from the lot line, and an 8-foot 0-inch building height modification to the required 15-foot maximum building height at the rear west setback to allow a building height of 23 feet 0 inches at the rear or west setback at the property located at 1610 South Church Street, bearing the legal description of Lot 5 and the south part of Lot 4 of Block 4 of the Logan Addition. Whew. And so, commissioners, we have quite a set of zoning modifications related to this addition. I'm going to walk through what those are. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to see that laid out in the staff report and presentation, but we'll go over those hopefully so that we're very clear on what the request is and why so many different modifications are needed for this particular request. So this is on slide 4, we're looking at the front of the house at 1610 South Church Street. And as I go to slide 5, we're looking at the location map showing that this is at the corner of South Church and East 17th Street. It's in our Old Town Historic District, and it is just to the east, a couple of blocks from our Belford National Register Historic District. And on slide 6, you can see the property outlined in red. This is a medium priority structure, and it's surrounded by high, medium, and low priority structures, and a few that are non-contributing, meaning that the houses have been built more recently than we consider a historic structure to be. And so for a lot of reasons, I was doing some research into the history of this property. And so this 1925 Sanborn map that I got my hands on a couple of months ago does show an extent of Georgetown that captures this house. So we can see in 1925, there was a dwelling with a front porch and a rear porch. And we see this little accessory structure to the rear, which turns out to have been a garage. And so the property in its form today is very similar to the property in 1925. And then in 1964, we can see still very similar. You can see what we call a hip style roof. And then you can see the small structure toward the rear property right there along 17th Street. In the 1974 aerial photo is really blurry in this part. So that photo zoomed in is not as clear, but we're essentially showing the same thing as the 1964 aerial photo. And commissioners, you saw in the staff report that there was a little bit of a question and a discrepancy in the historic resource surveys on when this house was built. So I did a little bit of research to verify, and it turns out that this house was built about 1913 by C.S. Griffith, or the Griffith Lumber Company. Griffith was a contemporary of C.S. Belford, so we have the Belford Lumber Company and the Griffith Lumber Company operating at the same time. Sometimes the houses that they constructed have some similarities, but this is a Griffith house, which is really kind of fun to know. And so this is a 1981 Texas Historical Commission photo. I usually show our 1984 Historic Resource Survey photos, but it turns out in 1981, the THC had a set of photos of Old Town, and this was a great front view of the house. So what you might notice that's a little bit different is that the house used to be just a single story. It had 2 brick chimneys. The front porch looked a little bit different. You can see the wood shingles surrounding the porch. You can see these columns and kind of a very simple hip roof. You can also see these very large front windows, a front door in the center with side lights, and then there was wood siding for the exterior with, at this point in time, at least concrete steps up to the front. And then here's another view looking at the northeast corner of the house. So you can see some of the detail there. So just a little bit of a picture. And then we have a second floor added. That was a really tall roof. And so this kind of dormer feature was added in order to add a second floor to the house. There's also been, it looks like the back porch was enclosed at some point. and kind of maybe perhaps added on to a little bit. So there's a lot about the house that we can still recognize today, and then there have also been a few changes. You see the columns on the front porch are the same, but those wood shingles have been removed to kind of open up the front porch a little bit. And then the chimneys that had been there originally were removed, and now there's just a single chimney on the north side. So as you look at the plans, what I wanted to highlight, and I thought was important, this is the kind of rear side door that the breezeway addition is proposed to connect over. So if you step out this door, you would be stepping out under this breezeway roof to be able to then walk back to the proposed kind of carport and living space and storage addition that the property owner is proposing. You can see on the left side of the screen a very large tree, and that tree is located in the city's right-of-way, not on the property owner's property. And so there are a couple of important things to highlight that are related to this request. We do have a couple of very large trees in the city's right-of-way, and we also have, you can see hopefully at the bottom, I'm on slide 14, you can see near the bottom there's a large manhole cover, and that plays a role in the ability to relocate the driveway. And so it would be very difficult to successfully relocate the driveway closer to the house because of the location of the trees and also the location of that manhole cover, which is going to city utility infrastructure. And so as we move down East 15th Street or move westerly on East 17th Street, you can see the existing carport. And so you might have seen on the historic resource survey sheet, there used to be a garage here. From what I can tell, that was the 1925 garage that was removed a few years ago. Not by this property owner, that was removed by a previous property owner who also constructed this carport with rear storage. And so the current owner bought the property in this configuration. And then you can see there's a little gravel driveway that's been there for a very long time. And then they kind of made use of that. And the city recently made right-of-way improvements and installed this concrete curb. And you can also see new asphalt right there. And so the city put in a curb cut, what we call a curb cut, basically a place for vehicles to drive through to access driveways. And then this is looking kind of toward the rear, so you can see where vehicles are parked. You can see that curb cut, and then you can get a look back toward the rear of the house and see where that addition and the connecting breezeway are proposed to be constructed. And then just another view of the existing carport. So this carport's not historic, and so if the property owner wanted to demolish it, it would not require any kind of review or approval by Harc or the HPO, since it's not a historic structure. Okay, so I want to get into why some of the setbacks and building height modifications are included in this request. And commissioners, this is something that, since I've been here at least, hasn't come before us, and so it's a little bit different setback situation. And I hope that I've illustrated that sufficiently enough. There is one more component that is required for full approval for this project from the COA perspective. And I missed that one. That didn't get included in the notification. So there's an additional building height modification, and we made reference to it in the staff report. And that's not noticed for this meeting. So we have public notice requirements that we have to meet in order to be able to have a public hearing on the item. One of those bullet points that should have been there was missed. So it is, we've sent out notification for the next Harc meeting on the 27th. So we're fully notified and agendized for the meeting on the 27th, but we do have one piece missing that won't be part of the public hearing or the discussion tonight that is needed for this project. So with all that background, I'm showing the site survey provided by the property owner. And this is has some important information and something that I sometimes see in Old Town, but I'm not sure that the commissioners have seen before. So where I have a red dash line, that is showing where the line is between lot 4 and lot 5. And so when the Logan addition was platted, the lots were stacked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 along Church Street. And it was really, in some places, common for someone to purchase 2 lots or a lot and a half so that they could have a larger yard. So if you can imagine scooting this house down so that it did not cross the red line, they wouldn't have had as much side yard available. So it wasn't that uncommon for someone to buy a lot and a half and then build a house right on top of the lot line. Because back in the early 20th century, we didn't care if you did that or not. That was perfectly fine. Here in 2020, we do care, and we no longer allow you to construct structures across lot lines. You'd have to go through a process to remove that interior lot line. And so one of the things that is a little bit different for y'all to see tonight that is part of this request is the red dash line that you see has the same 6-foot side setback that the property line along that you're used to seeing a budding adjacent property on the side. That 6-foot setback applies here. And you can see with the solid line red box, that's where they're proposing to put this addition. And so it is closer than 6 feet to this lot line. And therefore, technically, even though the property owner owns everything within that dark, very kind of thick black line, they own all of that, but it's a lot and a half. And so as we're getting really close to that lot line, it does require a setback modification. And the structure that they want to construct is not allowed to cross that lot line according to our Unified Development Code. So one of the setback modifications, and it's the 2-foot 9-inch setback encroachment into the required 6-foot side setback along that north lot line. That's where that comes from. And so the building height modification that was not included in the notification for this public hearing is the building height modification that's needed because of the height of the second story and how close it is to that setback. So we require a maximum 15-foot building height at the rear setback or the side setback or the front setback, any setback. And because this would be taller than 15 feet at the setback, it requires a building height modification. So I hope that's sufficiently clear, but if not, commissioners, I'm happy to answer questions once we get to the staff answering questions portion of this presentation. And so you can see that we are also close to the rear 10-foot setback, the kind of the left side of this structure, if you will, or the west side. And so we're also encroaching into that, although this is the place where a garage has existed since at least very shortly after the house was built, if not at the same time. And this is the same location that the carport and shop exists now. So the proposed new structure would not encroach any further into the rear setback than the existing structures already do. And then finally, we require a 25-foot setback for street-facing garages and carports. And so in this instance, the front of the carport would be closer than 25 feet to the property line. And again, no further toward the street or no closer to the street than what is there already. But because it's proposed to be a new structure, it would require a setback modification as well. And so that's proposed to be set 19 feet, 8 inches from the street instead of the 25 feet from the street. And then because the height of the second floor is taller than the 15 feet along the rear setback, that requires a building height modification as well. So that is a lot of different pieces. And again, commissioners, if y'all have questions or need clarification about that, I'm happy to go into it further. So moving on to slide 19, we're looking at the site plan provided by the applicant. And so this is showing where we would have a new carport, storage, and second floor living space connected to the house via a breezeway. And the reason for that connection is because our Unified Development Code limits the size of detached structures. And so you can only have up to 25% of the square footage of your house be a detached accessory structure like a garage or another roof structure. And so in order to kind of acknowledge that limitation, the applicant, the property owner is proposing to connect these two structures together, which we have seen before. This happens to be a longer breezeway than we're accustomed to seeing. And part of that reason you saw with the trees and the manhole cover limiting where the driveway can be moved, but also part of the reason the applicant wanted to explain as part of their comments to the commission. And so here we see elevations. On the left, you can see the street elevation, just a simple gable roof. The storage area would have a small overhead door at the back to make it easy to move things in and out, and then a staircase up the side to access the living space on the second floor. And then the elevation on the right shows what that would look like, and then also kind of an isometric view or an angled view showing how the breezeway would connect and where. And so this house is located, like I said, at the corner of East 17th Street, South Church Streets, and it's surrounded by other properties, similar in size, smaller in size, mostly one-story properties, I believe, but true to Old Town, there's quite a mix of different structures in this area. And so when staff reviewed the application, we found that it complied or partially complied with the applicable guidelines. The master sign plan did not apply in this case because there's no signage proposed. And then commissioners, we do have setback approval criteria, and that covers 2 slides. So here in the first set of criteria, staff found that the request either partially complied or complied with the requirements or the approval criteria, and in a couple of places not applicable. And then on the second set of criteria I'm showing on this slide, we're on slide 24, it either partially complied or complied with one exception. The size of the proposed structure compared to similar structures within the same block. When staff looked at structures in the block to see if there were similarities, we found that this did not comply, and not because we found it to be significantly out of scale with other structures or other residential structures. It was mostly the way that the addition was proposed to be arranged with the long breezeway connection. And so that's why that was listed as it does not comply. We also have approval criteria for building height modification request. And so most of these are related to our downtown, and staff found that either complied, partially complied, or in many cases, those criteria were not applicable because this is not on the town square or in the downtown historic district. And so 2 signs were posted on the property, 40 letters were mailed. Staff received 1 comment in favor, which was included in the agenda packet. We have not received any additional comments as of the beginning of this meeting. And so staff's recommendation, pardon me for how long this is, but staff's recommendation is essentially approval of the request for the addition, and also the setback encroachment along that north line where I showed you the lot line lies under the house. So we recommend approval of that setback encroachment, also the encroachment for the street facing garage, which also applies to carports, and the building height modification at the rear. What staff is recommending denial of is the rear setback modification. So rather than allowing the structure to be 5 feet 6 inches from the rear, which is where the existing structure is now, staff recommends to not approve that setback, which would cause the structure to have to be 10 feet from the rear property line and a little bit closer to the house. And so that would not substantially shorten the breezeway, but it would shorten the breezeway just a little bit. And staff does believe that you would be able to angle a driveway successfully to access the carport. And so that's what staff's recommendation is based on. So recommending approval of the request with the 1 exception of denial of the request for the rear setback encroachment. And then also if the structure were required to be 10 feet from the rear setback or from the rear property line instead of the 5 foot 6 feet, it would reduce how close that second story is to the adjacent property owner. And so as usual, commissioners, you have options as you make a motion: to approve as presented by the applicant, to deny as presented by the applicant, to approve with conditions. And if you have conditions, please be specific about what those are. And then also you have the option to postpone. And if you do need to postpone, we would ask that you provide specific reasons for the postponement. And then also it would be good to know if there is a specific date that we can set for that postponement to bring this case back to the commissioners. And so that concludes the staff presentation. I am happy and available to answer questions. And also the property owner is on the call and does have some comments to make to the commission.
Okay, thank you, Britton. So I understand the applicant is here. Would you like to make any comments right now to the commission? I don't see anyone yet.
I do see that Mr. Mayor, I believe, is the is the applicant. That's correct, Britton.
Yes, that's correct.
He did raise his hand. Mr. Mayor, are you able to unmute your?
Is he
Great.
just on the phone, Nat?
We see you now on your camera. Welcome to the meeting. You should have a function to unmute your computer. There is also a call-in option for the mayors if they'd like to participate that way.
Okay, I don't see them on the video anymore, Nat. Have they? Fallen off the video?
Perhaps.
Okay. Britton, Catherine's asking, can you turn off the screen share so we can see everybody? I don't know if we need to see the motions up or. Thank you.
Thanks. I just asked for it so that we could see the owner when he was making his presentation. And I also see that Art's here.
Yes, Art has joined us. Robert is going to vote on this item since he started at the beginning, but Art is with us now.
What we could do, Chair and Britton, make sure you agree with this, but I think we could probably go on to commissioner questions, and if they have any of Britton, and I'll work in the background to see if I can get the mayors maybe on the phone rather than the computer.
Okay, thanks, Nat.
I do, if I could offer, I do have, I'm familiar with what they wanted to share with the commission. And so if needed, I could also let the commission know what they had let me know they were planning to say.
Okay, Nat, why don't you check with them and then we'll move on to questions for the commission to Britton and then see if we can get them back.
Okay. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Britton, I have one question, just for clarification. It's so, in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that we're going to see this item back on the 27th.
That's correct. And so a little more explanation. We have a set of items, it's 5 items, I believe, that we provided notification for this evening. So it's for the addition, it's for 3 setback encroachments, and then also 1 building height modification. Since there is another building height modification needed, we needed to provide notice to surrounding property owners and also put signs up for that and make sure that that was included. And so in order to accomplish that, we did not have time to get it included in this one. So we've provided notification for all 6 items for the meeting on August 27th. And so we have, for the 5 that we have agendized for today, the commission does have the opportunity to make a decision on those 5 items, but the commission cannot make a decision on the 6th item, and the commission also can't really discuss that item because we're not agendized for it. So my sincere apologies for that. We try not to let that happen very often. Sometimes it does when we're doing our double checks to make sure we've caught everything. And so one of the options the commission has this evening is to go ahead and make a decision on the 5 items that are listed. We would still bring back the 6th item at the next meeting, or because we have full notification for all 6 items for the next meeting, the commission could vote to continue the item until the next meeting. That way, all notification requirements will be met and are being met. But if the commission wanted to make a decision with all 6 required items in front of them to be considered at once, the commission has the option to do that.
Okay,
I
that's
have
what I
a
was.
question.
Oh, sorry, Catherine. Can I just finish that statement? That's what I was getting at. You know, my personal preference would be that we see the entire item. You all may feel differently, and that's fine. We can discuss that. But we would not be delaying anything for this applicant, correct? Because they have to come back next meeting when we do have them on the agenda for the 27th. So we would see them back in 2 weeks.
Yes.
So I wonder if we want to consider a postponement at this point, but I will entertain other comments.
So this is Catherine Morales, and my comment is, how related are the 5 to the 6th item? If you can imagine any sort of decision that we make, either approving some, denying some, how do they interact with this 6th item that we cannot discuss today?
So that is a fantastic question. And so they interact in, if you consider that the request for this edition, the majority of the edition in terms of volume or size or scale is in this carport, rear storage, and then living above. And so there is a breezeway connector that is part of the addition, but a lot of what we're looking at and the reasons for the setback and building height modifications are related to this 2-story structure. And so in order to construct that structure or to be able to move forward with a building permit for that structure, that 6th item, that building height modification that's not included in this set, would be needed. I'm hoping that the commission has kind of a clear enough view of what the request is, that at least the entire request is clear to the commissioners. But if you feel that it really needs to be talked about on the whole, then we can certainly go with the continuing the item or postponing the item and kind of bring it all up together at the next meeting.
Hi, this is Terry Hyde. I have a question. Do you have any idea how many other items are on the agenda for the next meeting?
At the moment, just one other. And notifications went out yesterday. And so there would just be this item and then a second item at the meeting on the 27th.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
Amanda,
Brittany,
this is Carol Lee. I do have questions.
Okay, let's go with Carol Lee first and then Steve.
Okay.
Okay. I can't, I guess I'm, when they come back in August, are they going to present materials? I don't remember ever approving a building in Old Town without talking about the materials they're building it out of or the windows. The elevation that's presented, I don't think covered that.
So that's feedback from the commission that could also be part of a postponement decision, is to provide feedback to the applicant or the property owner on whether the commission has sufficient information to make a decision. One of the reasons that we have the postponement listed in your set of motions is in case there's additional information that the commission needs to be assured in making the decision that they're making. And so everything that you've seen is the materials that were provided by the applicant to staff. And then we have in the staff report, we covered what the materials are. So it's going to be fiber composite siding, vinyl windows, and asphalt shingle roof. The appearance would have some similarities to the existing structure, so that they would tie together. But kind of what we see, the materials would be what we see fairly frequently. And then the posts for the carport were going to be, I believe, 4x4 wood post. And so some of those things are captured in the staff report, but not in the drawings. And so if the commission needed to see more complete drawings, that is something that the commission could give feedback on and then ask for those to be brought back at the later meeting.
Well, I'd at least like to see it labeled on the drawing, not asking them to do anything you know, any professional drawings, but to indicate that this is what the siding is here, this is what the post is here, just some notes, because it just feels like we're looking at a blank slate.
Okay.
My
Thank you,
input.
Shirley. Steve, would you like?
Hi, can you
No,
hear?
he's talking to that,
Oh.
Steve.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good.
Oh, good, okay.
All right. I think we missed a little bit when we were, fiddling around with our settings, but I guess we haven't really hammered out exactly the materials and everything, but we don't want to do anything that's not going to look nice with our house. It's an old house, and we want to keep that flavor, but we didn't want to have to move our carport or our shed because our backyard's really important to us, and aesthetically it would be very pleasing to leave it the way it is now, just to make it a little bit larger and more functional, but not have to move it into the yard and have to move a maple tree that we have pretty well established and other plants that we have put in, because gardening is really important to me, and it's going to be a mess anyway. The less I lose, the better. And the proposed building is not next to another home that would be like, blocking their view or their shade or anything. So I can't think of any other questions besides that you might have, but shoot away.
Thank you. Carolee, do you have anything? I don't know if they heard all of that. Were you able to hear what Commissioner Nunn was speaking about some additional information on materials and things? You want to repeat that, Carolee?
Yes, I guess I'd like to see on your sketch of the elevation that you simply write in what the materials are that you're going to use. And I understand there's a listing in the report, but maybe if it's going to be similar to the windows in your house, maybe you can take a photograph of that so that we see a visual.
They would be double hung. They wouldn't be like awning windows or anything.
Right, but if you could take a photograph of that, it helps us to document it so that, not that we think you would intentionally change your mind, but if something gets changed down the line, I would like to know what we agreed to in this meeting.
Right. So they would look similar, but they won't be like 100 years old. But they would have a similar look, right?
Yes, I think we're hearing what you're saying, but I think the commission is saying that we are going to need some additional information provided from you to document those materials.
Right.
Okay.
And I think Britton can talk with you in more depth about what that would look like, depending upon what decision is made to move forward tonight. Okay. Is there any other questions that we have specifically for the applicant? Steve, did you have something you wanted to ask of the applicant or Britton?
No, ma'am, I'll pass.
I do have another question for Britton, and I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why we would approve all these other little minimal variances, but we would want them to move it farther from the property line, from the east property line. Which property line are we not approving? I'm sorry.
Totally up to y'all. That's Harc's discretion.
Right, but you're recommending.
Yes, and so the reason is staff's concern.
Which one is it first?
So the one that and do y'all mind if I go ahead and share my presentation again?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to. See if my keyboard will work. Okay, so hopefully I'm on the recommendation slide number 27.
Could you show me the picture? That'll help me a lot, though.
Yes, back to the one with the red line.
Yes.
Okay, so we're on slide 18. And so it's staff's assessment that the setback and building height that are along that dash red line that's essentially a cleanup of an over 100-year-old issue, and not something that has any negative impact on another property. That's something that staff finds to be a very reasonable request, and something that Harc may be seeing in the future with other properties and other projects, because this is a condition that we're starting to see a lot, where we have a lot line through the middle of the property because the property includes either 1.5 lots or 2 lots. And that didn't mean anything when the house was built, but it does mean something now. And we're trying to figure out how to fit old things with new rules and help them to live together. So in the staff report, we mentioned a building height modification there. We are agendized and noticed for a setback modification there. Staff finds no issue with that. The setback for the garage, the garage setback, which is actually a carport, but we call it a garage setback. That's an existing encroachment, and so staff find that there's no real substantial change and no real substantial impact from that, and that's why staff is approving that request, or recommending approval of that request, excuse me. And so on the rear setback, the one that's along the left side of this line, which abuts another property, it's not encroaching into a property such that it gets really close to another structure, or is expected to be negative on or kind of impede the maintenance of another structure. Staff's concern is that with that setback modification, we do get a really long breezeway connection. And there's, our guidelines don't speak very specifically to that. The breezeway connection is a solution that has been used in Old Town quite a bit to connect additions so that they do meet the UDC requirements. And so that's a practice that we've had for some time in Old Town. And those are requests that we continue to see. Our concern was over that length. And so, but it is Harc's decision on whether or not to approve that. And staff's recommendation is only based on concerns over the setback, allowing that breezeway to be that much longer than it would be if the setback were not approved. And that's the only reason why, not because it's expected to have any negative impacts on adjacent property.
Britton, does that carport have a concrete slab?
I would defer to the applicant on that. I may have captured it in photos. No, I believe that's gravel right now. And so what would happen is, for the new construction, they would have to build a slab for the carport and also a concrete driveway. So they would need to be pouring a concrete driveway. I did speak to our landscape planner about getting a concrete driveway that's going to be required for their building permit close to that tree, which is the tree you can see on the far right. And he did caution against getting too close to the root zone. He thought if it were moved 4.5 feet over, it may not have a big impact, but the property owner has, at least to staff, kind of talked about some concerns about trying to move that driveway curb cut, and would prefer to use the existing driveway curb cut that the city has already poured and essentially kind of approved in place. And so they were wanting to make use of what was existing and work around these large trees that, not technically in their yard, but the city has a preference to retaining the trees to the extent that we're able to.
So they would like to leave it where it is because of the curb cut and because of the tree.
Yes, that's correct.
And there's already a carport there. So
yes,
I realize they would do something new, but they're not going to be putting something any closer to that property line than it already is.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the applicant would like to address that as well. They've raised their hand.
Go ahead.
There is a slab in the shed area, so that's all concrete back there. So it's like half concrete, and the front, the carport is not concrete.
Right. Okay. I see that. Thank you for pointing that out. Now. I will offer that it doesn't bother me that it stays there, and I think there are good reasons for it to stay there rather than to move over.
Agreed.
Sorry, I'm talking on mute. Thank you, Carolee. Any other questions or comments for staff? or the applicant? Okay, I have one question about the height, Britton. You know, we hear a lot about height when we're looking at projects. And so when I see that we have, you know, a height modification, but we do have a 2-story primary structure. So are we still, you know, subordinate to the main structure, or what is the height looking like?
So in this case, it would be a little bit, from what I can tell, it would be a little bit shorter than the main structure. Even though it started out as a 1-story house, that is a very, very tall 1-story house because of that roof. And then when those dormers were added, I believe the roof was shifted up a little bit. And so I don't expect this to be taller than or kind of imposing in comparison. And I think it's a little bit challenging to see in the drawings, but what I do think is important to highlight is I'm on slide 20, and in the drawing that you're seeing on the left, that's not all one, where the carport is and what would be facing 17th Street. The initial portion is, the portion that's closest to the street is this 1-story portion. The 2-story portion is set back over the storage area and only covers the carport by 6 feet. And so you're not getting the full 2 stories at the street facade. You're only getting 1 story with the 2nd story set back. And so from that perspective, it's kind of consistent with what's on the site, because that 2nd floor would be set back kind of more in line with the house and less in line with where the carport is now. And so from the side, from the property to the west, you would have a part of it would be a 1-story next to you, and then there would be a 2-story segment next to you, but further back. And so in that way, it kind of steps back from the street, if you will. And so I think what you would see from the street, and also because those trees tend to be a bit in the way, it kind of lessens the visual impact of the 2nd floor, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Commission. So this is a public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up to speak in the public hearing, Nat?
No, ma'am, I do not. And I've checked with Myrna. Nobody has asked her to speak either.
Okay, thank you. So not hearing anyone signed up to speak in the public hearing, I will close the public hearing. Any other comments or questions from the Commission? Okay. So how do we want to move forward with this item? I will entertain a motion, keeping in mind what we've already discussed about our next meeting.
Catherine Morales, I'd like to make a motion that we postpone until we have all of the items available to be reviewed at the same time so we can understand the implications. And also to postpone for the applicant to provide samples or drawings that include the types of materials proposed.
Okay, thank you, Catherine.
And I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Britton, do you have enough information to understand what you need for that motion?
Yes, I certainly do. Thank you all very much.
Okay. All right, let's take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Hyde?
Approve.
Commissioner Curry?
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston?
Approve.
Commissioner Morales?
Approve.
Commissioner Nunn?
Approve.
And Commissioner McCabe?
Approve.
Okay, thank you. We'll postpone that item until our next Harc meeting on August 27th. Thank you. Okay, item E, we have a staff presentation, which I'm sure is going to be riveting, by our lovely historic planner, Britton. Take it away.
This one's actually going to be Nat. You'll get
sorry.
a new presenter tonight. Normally it's me, but I think Nat's really well able to present this information. Although I'm always here for questions and answers.
Sorry, Nat. We're excited to see you. Ready to go.
Let me first unmute myself. I apologize. I'm going to start my video in case you need to see any facial expressions, and then I'm going to share my screen. Commissioner Parr, are you seeing the Harc annual work plan slide?
Yes.
Great. Commissioners, thanks for giving me an opportunity to chat with you. We've learned in the planning department that it's really helpful if one person can present and the other person can listen. So the most important part of this is being played by Britton. She's taking in what you have to say, and I'm just here to present the information and provoke you in giving some candid responses. I hope you see it as a candid opportunity to share with us. We are all about providing excellent public service, and we know you are as well. And so we're open to the feedback, and we're wanting to create an opportunity for you to give us that feedback. So tonight, we'd really like to talk with you about really three things. One, are there training opportunities that you would like to see between now and basically March, when the new commission gets seated? And of those, are there priorities for that training? The other thing we'd like to talk with you about is the application material that you review, that we provide on behalf of the applicants themselves. We're going to call those tools for tonight's discussion. Included in those tools are also staff reports that we put together for your review. And then there are exhibits that accompany those staff reports and presentations. We'd like to get some feedback from you. We're going to call those tools just to simplify things for tonight. And then you have some complicated meeting procedures in terms of online meetings and the vote procedures that you have to take that are required. So we'd like to get some feedback on that. I'm gonna start off with kind of the easier and fun topics. Britton and I have taken a look at some past training material and some things that we see somewhat frequently come before you. This is just an illustrative list. It's not in any ways exhaustive, but the National Register districts, what goes into creating those? You have 4 of them. What goes into the individual listings of properties? And then how is the state also using its own process and procedures to do recorded Texas historic landmarks? What's all involved with that process? We have the design guidelines, which take their cue for recommendations based on the Secretary of the Interior standards. So there are some similarities there, but there are some differences. We see the question come up about repair versus replace quite frequently, and the council did give some direction back in April of 2019 about in-kind materials. That's what we're referring to when we talk about historic materials. As you may know, or are aware, we are updating the design guidelines based on that April 2019 ordinance by the City Council. And we'd like to keep you apprised of the update, but also want to get your input on some of the things that are coming out of that update. We do see demolitions of properties, and there are criteria, and there are also properties that replace those properties, or in some cases there are vacant properties in and around the old town and downtown that are what we're calling infill. As we move forward into next year, we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to understand the content of the new design guidelines once they're adopted. There is the training that many of you participated in. March seems like a decade ago, but there is a training that we provide commissioners. We'd like to get some feedback on that. You do see quite a bit of commercial signage, so like to offer that as a topic. And then Britton has assembled on historic.georgetown.org a wealth of resources, but there are other resources out there that we want to make sure that you're aware of, and if and how we might use those to assist you in your deliberations. Are there any topics the commission would like to add or modify to this list?
So now I just have a question. You just mentioned the design guideline process update and then the new design guidelines. Could that be one topic or not really?
It could. We did include them purposefully as 2 because we want to make sure just that we're creating space on your agenda for topics as they come up during the update. But then once the update is done, we want to go back and revisit them and make sure that the commission has what they need with the new design guidelines.
Okay. Okay. And then do you see the Secretary of Interior Standards also being a sub? I mean, I realize we're trying to maximize time too, but I was just, mentioning some of those mirror things with the design guidelines and some of them don't. Could those work together in a presentation, again, to try to maximize, but also cover these topics?
Yeah, I think they could probably be combined, but I'm going to defer to the subject matter expert on this one.
The reason why we thought of it as a topic on its own, one, these are meant to be fairly brief when we present these, so kind of looking to fit these in when we have fewer cases. So if we have one case or that needs to come forward or kind of 2 shorter cases, we would bring also kind of a brief presentation. On the days that we might have 3 or 4 cases, we would just want to stick to the caseload to kind of be respectful of everybody's time. But because the Secretary of the Interior standards are one of the 8 review criteria for certificates of appropriateness, I thought it might be good to cover what that means and what that looks like. It is really brief, usually when applied to most of what y'all consider in applications. But in case there was not familiarity with that, we want to be able to bring it up. If y'all say, hey, we get it, this is pretty clear to us, we're happy to go ahead and scratch it from the list for now and kind of park it for maybe further down the road in case it does need to come up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, for me, I think all these are great topics. I just didn't know if you were asking us to select certain ones or if we're going to have just small, short sessions. I think that would be ideal if we could cover each of these. I definitely have a priority for what I think is what I feel is, should take precedence over others. And of course, I'll let others speak on that as well. For me, the design guidelines, the new design guidelines, because we deal with those at every meeting, I think are important. I think demo and infill is super important because we are just now seeing infill as a commission with the changes to Harc in the last year. And then because we've had some interesting things occur with demo recently, they're controversial, they're challenging. And so looking at, demos, and then also looking at making sure that we're saying the right things with demo, with the asbestos issue that we had recently, and then being sure that when we're asking people to archive and when we're asking people to salvage, that we have a process for how we're then documenting that. So when we're asked, we have a clear answer for people, like what happened, which was great with the wood floor in the recent demo that then Chansley is repurposing. But I just want to be sure everybody's clear on demo and infill. Yeah, so for me, I think design guidelines, interior standards, and demo and infill would be priority first, and I'll let others speak.
So if I could ask a question, are there any, has there been any public feedback or applicant feedback on Harc and the discussions that have occurred in the last 6 months? And or is there anything that we do to look at each of the elements to see if it complies or not complies, and then how we voted from one case, one situation to another to see if there's any opportunity to address variability and how we interpret or how we interpret or apply the regulation, the guidelines. So, and I guess what I'm getting at is there anything external that would inform us on what training we need to make sure that we're appropriately applying the guidelines and consistently applying the guidelines?
I have not received any feedback whatsoever from our community on our Harc meetings, and I think planning staff is absolutely welcoming of that. This is a public process for a reason. And I'm hoping through going through the design guideline update process that we will have the opportunity for public engagement that might encourage more of our community to either participate or to provide some kind of feedback or comment. But as far as the applicants or property owners go, even in the kind of few instances in which the commission has voted to deny either an application or a portion of an application in that request, the applicant or the property owner has been very clear on the reasons why, and has been satisfied to leave Harc's decision as a valid and complete decision. And so every time we do have a denial, I do provide information to the applicant or the property owner that they have the opportunity to appeal a decision to City Council if they feel that they've been aggrieved by that decision. And since I've been here, that option's not been pursued. And so for the most part, what I hear, which, may be limited, but what I hear is just kind of a general acknowledgement of Harc's decision-making and kind of the thoroughness of the staff reports and presentations, and that it looks like a lot of information is being kind of presented for context around the decision being made. But I don't have feedback, but I think if y'all are aware of community members who would like to provide feedback or have suggestions, we are here to serve the community, as Nat said, and we think that role is important. And we think that's an important part of the public hearing process to be able to take that information into. And so it may be a little bit easier to do when we're meeting in person, because people may feel like they have easier access to staff to speak to us directly in person and to provide comments. And so what I'm not entirely sure about is if the virtual meeting format has felt limiting in that regard. You see for tonight, for example, we didn't have a highly attended meeting. We didn't have a lot of people participating in the meeting that were not directly part of the process. And so one of our hopes was that this being virtual would allow more people to participate. And sometimes that looks to be the case and sometimes it doesn't. And so as we ask you these questions and ask for feedback, this is a great opportunity, Commissioner Mitchell, to express exactly this, which is, how is our community perceiving the work that we do? Are they engaged, or do there need to be ways for us to assure people that they have the opportunity for engagement, especially right now when we're very limited on seeing people face to face?
Yeah, so thank you. That addresses that sort of part A. I think part B had to do with how consistently we vote based on when there is a not comply or partially comply on particular guidelines. And that's kind of a data junkie view of the world, and my only point is that it may give us insight into where we are as clear, because there's variability between when it's, say, a not comply or partially comply, and and every case is different, but if there's a pattern of it, I think it'd be interesting to see it. And it may not be worth it, but it's just something to think about if your systems allow that. Otherwise, I will say I concur with Amanda's list, and if that was in sequential order of priorities, I would agree with that sequence as well. So my
okay.
7 cents.
Thank you. And if I could offer to just to respond to that. So I think I mentioned we have 2 cases for the next meeting. I think we actually have this case coming back and then 2 additionally. And so if y'all remember, commissioners, I think everyone was in that meeting. There was a circumstance in which I presented 2 carport additions. Both required setback modifications and both were prefabricated metal carports. And the decision on those 2 cases was very different. One was an approval and one was not an approval, or at least it was an approval with conditions. And the condition was that the carport had to be set back. And it is certainly foremost in my mind when I bring 2 separate cases to the commission that are very similar, that bear similarities, but in which staff may be making a recommendation that is different for each. That's something that we pay very close attention to, because the importance of a fair assessment and a fair evaluation and a fair decision-making process is, of course, really important. And so next week we actually do have, in 2 weeks we have, I believe, we've provide a notification for commercial signage and also notification for another garage addition that is 2 stories that would also have a breezeway. And I'm sharing with you information that's already public information. Notices have gone out, which is why I'm speaking about it in this meeting. Not because those cases are a discussion topic, but I think they illustrate we really want to move people forward in the process to a decision as quickly as is feasible so that we are not delaying projects unnecessarily. And it sometimes happens that similar cases might be ready to come forward to Harc at the same time, which might have just very different situations or contexts. And so maybe on paper they're the same, but they're actually very different. And I think staff is very interested in how do we support the commissioners in making a decision that is based in our review criteria, and also kind of from a big picture sense, what is in the best interest of historic preservation for our community and in protecting our historic districts. And it is really challenging work that y'all do to evaluate conditions which are all completely unique. Corner buildings are not all the same. Additions are not all the same. Houses are not all the same. In fact, they're very different. And we have a beautiful and rich variety of structures in our historic districts, but that also presents some real challenges, such as how you evaluate. And so what I think we could absolutely do is kind of look at, and I think this is where the design guideline updates is going to be really helpful, because this is where we have the opportunity to bring that experience and bring those questions into that process and say, how do we update our design guidelines in a way that can maybe address some things and be more specific about approval criteria where we think we need a little bit stronger criteria or more clear and specific criteria. So if someone is asking for a 2-story garage addition, what indeed does that look like? Because there are going to be a lot of different contexts for that. It might be to a 2-story house, a 1-story house. It might be a very large lot. It might be a very small lot. And so how do we make sure that we have a way to evaluate fairly, as well as support the commission's decision-making on behalf of our community? And I know that was me saying a lot, but it's really to try to kind of highlight the thought behind how we're taking that approach, and where staff definitely acknowledges that sometimes there's some challenging timing on request and challenging differences, but not differences in request. And we always try to be really sensitive to that, knowing that that going into a public process with that, it's open to scrutiny. The decisions are open to scrutiny, and as well they should be.
Yeah, I think for me, Pam, I mean, I completely agree with that. I think, you know, we always want to be, I guess, consistent would be the word I'd use, but then you look at each, you know, I brought up height tonight because we talk about height a lot, but in this particular project, you know, we have to evaluate, does the height work with the particular property? So I don't, you know, I agree, Britton, anyway, that we can be sure that we're being consistent, but then also taking into consideration the uniqueness of every property in Old Town, which can be a challenge. So what other questions do we have on this slide? Any other comments?
This is Terry. I was going to say, from my perspective, I guess I could use a little more guidance on commercial buildings. That seems to be where we kind of run into some problems every now and then, especially when people bring in, I think we called them conceptual meeting, or I can't remember what they were, but they weren't really applying. They were just running a concept by us, and we would kind of judge those, and then they would come back. And I feel like we kind of, you know, while there was some kind of happening stuff in the square for a while there, we were kind of running into some problems with consistency. And I think it's just because, you know, there are some real feelings that come with those buildings because they get to be kind of big, and if they're new. So maybe with the infill discussion, we can, you know, maybe throw in some commercial or
Absolutely.
something like that. Thanks.
And y'all are going to be getting commercial infill before too long. If the applications come in, as I've been informed, and so we would. One of the things is we want to try to provide information and kind of the tools that y'all need, as Nat mentioned, ahead of decision making. And so where we're trying to get kind of back on track now is to say, we know that y'all have got decisions to make. We know there are certain review types and cases that will be coming up, and we'd like to try to assist in what that looks like before you actually have to make a decision, so that you have some experience and knowledge and feel confident in the decisions that you're being asked to make.
Madam Chairman, Steve.
Go ahead, Steve.
Do you think we need to have a workshop on these topics at a separate time and a separate date? Or do you think we can proceed?
Are you concerned about the length of time that these are taking, that these might take, Steve? Is that what you're?
Well, I'm just, concerns me that these are pretty big issues. And if we want to have a lot of discussion, maybe it'd be better at another time in another place so people could plan their time and set aside that time to discuss these in a workshop. I just throw that as an idea as opposed to trying to solve all these problems tonight.
Nat and Britton, is that an option to have, you know, it might not be all of this, but to have, if it's a more meaty topic, that we could have a workshop, or is that an option?
Always
Sure.
an option.
Absolutely. We'll take
We
your
love
feedback.
workshops.
We'll take your feedback tonight, and we'll come back to you with a game plan on trainings.
Okay, thank you.
If you're open to it, I just got a couple more questions on. So it's good feedback on training opportunities. I'm going to move forward, if that's all right, into some discussion on the tools that you have as things come in front of you. So by tools, I really mean there's application materials. There are exhibits that are attached to an item. Those may be site plans, those may be renderings, those may be material specifications. But you also have tools in terms of staff reports. And then you have the presentation of material by the staff summarizing basically what the applicant is asking for. So looking for some feedback from you tonight on those tools. You know, what application materials best help you make decisions?
So it's Catherine, and the comments I would make, first of all, since Britton's been here, the application materials have been superior. And in general, having the historic sort of setting and all the maps, I think very, very helpful. I would use today as an example of where the applicant has provided something that was not as helpful as we are normally seeing. So I understand they didn't have very sophisticated drawings, but still it's very hard for us, and I know Nat, you and Britton have especially been able to understand that we need to see photographs or drawings that show the relationship or a street view that has been sort of crafted so that we can see whether something is overwhelming or in addition to or next to a main house and a subsidiary structure. So I think you know what I'm getting at. So that, I think your guidance is going back to the applicant and trying to get them to improve their materials. And I know the decisions we've made where we've had photographs where we could see what the mass and scale relationship was, helped us, I think, make better decisions.
Thank you, Catherine. One thing that I would add, Nat, that I think has been super helpful, and I echo Catherine, that our materials, I think, have just gotten more and more sophisticated with more information, which is wonderful. The history is great. The maps are great. I think another thing that I think we've been doing well that I'd like to see is if we do have, sometimes we have projects that come up that get a little bit more comment from our community, and that can be positive or it can be negative. But I'll use the example of over on Olive Street with the demo and the infill, when we could see those comments, and then Britton was able to provide, there was some concern about the square footage of the infill, and Britton was able to provide the square footage of the surrounding properties so that we could then be prepared to answer the comment that we're receiving, again, whether that be positive or negative, but that we have an answer ready based on those comments, I think is super helpful. And then I don't know if this is the right place to state this, but the conceptuals, I know someone brought up Terry, I think you brought up conceptual earlier with commercial. I don't think we need a conceptual on every project, but I do think tonight sort of turned into a conceptual with us saying we really need this and we really need to see this. I think on certain projects, I think as we get more sophisticated and the paperwork gets more sophisticated, I think we need to impress upon our applicants that they need to either do a conceptual so they can hear our feedback, which then prevents them being surprised by a potential denial or denial with conditions or approval with conditions. So when we feel like a conceptual is needed, making sure we impress upon the applicants that they need to do that. And then if we don't think a conceptual is needed, being sure that they really understand that this is a sophisticated process and they need to provide the pertinent information.
So it's Catherine, and I just want to pick up on something that Amanda just said. In this specific case, I know, Britton, you were explaining if they angled the driveway out. So I don't know that it's your job, to provide a picture of what an angled driveway would look like, but it would have helped. I'm not sure they understood, but I could see their resistance to that suggestion and denial in your staff work.
And so that's something, things come up when they come up and then you go, oh, we need a way to address this. So those comments are really helpful this evening on this case. And we have definitely a range of application materials. Sometimes we see application materials from professional architects, licensed design professionals and practitioners. And sometimes a homeowner is doing their own work for their own project. And they might be doing that project themselves, or they might have just hired a contractor to do the work. And it might be small in scale. And so one of the important things for us in talking to y'all about this is getting a sense of what do you need to make a decision? Whatever that decision is, what do you need so that I can more effectively communicate back to applicants, this is what the expectation is, and this is what's going to be needed so that the commission can understand your request completely. Because there are real challenges if the request is difficult to understand. And Nat and I want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to be specific with our applicants about what they need to provide, and then also kind of understanding how to assist with that process. If it's the only time you've ever submitted a COA application, it can be a little bit overwhelming and a little bit like, wow, what do I do and what does it look like? And so we want to find a way to make that easier to understand for everybody, and be able to give some clear and specific guidance to our applicants on what that could look like. And I think talking about using a picture and providing a picture of materials or windows or roofing or features, I think that's a great way to go about that, because putting pictures together is something that most people can do pretty effectively for themselves. And so we want the application process to be accessible. We want as many people as possible to be able to participate doing their own work. We don't necessarily want everyone to have to spend a lot of money in order just to put the application together, especially on the smaller projects, but we don't want to ignore real needs for good communication of the project.
Britton, this is Faustine. Thank you for saying that last part. I think the key is it's wonderful to have the things we need, and it's so beneficial. And I have to say, I wasn't here pre-use, so I don't know what the applications used to look like. But I will say that, in my opinion, if we become so exacting and have so many prerequisites to put in an application, the burden becomes really so heavy for an applicant. And so thank you for saying that last part. I think that's really key, is to, although ask the applicant to provide information, but provide it in a way that anyone can make an application to have a house in our wonderful Old Town area. And so thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, and this is Carol Lee, and I was going to say the same thing. I appreciate that we are making the greatest effort so that homeowners who do not need to hire a professional don't have to do it, because that is a heavy burden to cross for so many reasons. And the information can be provided, by hand with photographs and notes. So I appreciate that as well.
So I'm hearing some, just want to make sure I'm tracking what you guys are saying. And I'm kind of checking in with the panel here. I'm hearing that you're satisfied with the application materials that are coming forward in terms of what each applicant is able to provide, whether they be a professional or a private homeowner. But I'm hearing you also say that it's on a case-by-case basis, that you need to make sure that staff is going through these materials to make sure that they're usable by the commission. Or is there a threshold that I'm hearing that that you think that there's a change that needs to be made? Is it that you need more pictures, or you need color drawings, or black and white drawings don't work? Are there any changes that stand out to you that you've thought, as you've looked at something, that this just isn't going to enable you to make a good decision?
This is Carol Lee, and I would offer that almost always there's plenty of information. Today was the first time that I felt maybe there wasn't adequate. And it's just that it wasn't all there together. So no, I think that 99% of the time, it looks great.
No, and I agree. I think today is the one exception where it was hard to visualize what they were trying to do, especially without having all the piece parts. And then I didn't find the response to you, Carol Lee, to be very comforting coming from the applicant about, well, I'm just going to do double hung windows. So, and you were asking, I thought, for something very reasonable and very simple: take a picture or bring a picture or write it on the actual diagram. So I don't think we're asking for a lot more than that. I think it just happened today that this one was a little more confusing than normal.
Do you find, last question, very specific to the application materials, do you find the letter of intent that the applicants provide to be helpful, or is there anything missing from that exhibit or application material?
So the letters of intent vary greatly depending on who's writing them and the point of view, and sometimes they can be very lengthy. So most of the time they are interesting, they add information, but I think that requiring somebody to do it unless they have something specific to say would not be necessary. In other words, if they're planning to be present and talk to us, they wouldn't necessarily have to write a very long letter of intent, because I think the staff materials that we receive are very complete.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. And this is Terry. And I also would just add that, for me personally, the best thing is really clear drawings with, setbacks written out where those setbacks are, and just, as clear as we can possibly make them, especially given our constraints right now. I guess we don't have, are there Zoom laser pointers? I don't know, but, it's hard to visualize even though it's all virtual. So just the clearer, the better. And I would echo what Catherine said about the letter of intent. It just kind of depends on the project. If it's controversial or something, then it might be helpful. But, if it's just a setback or something, it may not matter much.
Well, to me, if I might, the letter of intent at one point was overly important to me. Until now, with regards to the historical information resources that are added to every project, I want to give staff kudos for that, because receiving the historical content of each property that is on the agenda is a wealth of knowledge. And in addition to the fact, it tends to let me think that we're somewhat special because we're getting an inside history lesson on the historical district. So if I would make any comments pertaining to anything that you have covered, I would say more detail and more emphasis, and don't let up on the historical information to the commission.
I think in addition, you just made Britton's day.
Yes, yes.
Good, good, because it's heartfelt.
She works hard on that. If I may, I'm going to move us on to the next topic at hand, which is the process that you undertake kind of at each meeting. So, you know, we make a presentation to you, then the applicant can present, and then you ask your questions. You have the public hearing. There's a motion and a second, and then there's the you know, the clarification if anything needed before the approval. Is there a key part that stands out here for you in this process?
I think the staff presentation is the key part of this entire process. I always like when people come to the public hearing and have things to say. I think we learn a lot. That has not been a very big part of this process since the Zoom meeting started, but we've had a little bit of that. But clearly, I think our decisions are definitely enabled by having superior materials coming from you guys.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I mean, I think obviously the staff presentation is, you know, essential. I wish we had more public input on a regular basis and not just on at the time when there's a controversial project and then Harc becomes in the spotlight and they don't see the every other week work that we do. They just focus on the one controversial project. So, you know, if we could get more interest in that public hearing, that would be great. I would like to ask, obviously, as your chair, is there anything that you would like me to do differently as we, you know, move through this process? Okay, Nat?
Amanda, that question was for your commission.
Yeah, that was, yes, that was for the commission.
I think the process is really streamlined. It seems easy and flows well. I have to agree the staff presentation is always helpful. And Amanda, you move us right through the process and give everyone ample time to have their thoughts and opinions heard. So I appreciate how it flows.
Thank you.
I agree.
You know, I think one thing we've tried to improve upon, and I think Art, you might speak to this a little, is just being sure that we always take that pause, you know, to before we vote to say, you know, what else do we want to say? What else do you want to comment on? Is there, you know?
Amanda, I could not agree with you more. One of the key elements, as far as I'm concerned, with regards to having a successful meeting is that every member of the commission leaves the meeting with the feeling that they had the opportunity to say anything that they wanted to say. That's a key, and you've been doing a wonderful job on that. I applaud you for that. And I think that that's one of the key elements that we always have to work on. We want to always think in terms of when each commission member leaves the meeting, are they leaving with a feeling that they not only participated, but had the opportunity to say anything that they wanted to say, unless it's out of line.
Thank you, Art. Yeah, I think that that's, you know, I do want to be sure everybody has their time to speak, but I also, you know, I also want to say that, you know, I know it's hard sometimes on the dais and when this is a public meeting to really dialogue between us, but that's the time we have to do it. And it does have to be a public process. So, you know, I think everyone needs to feel like they can speak up and say what they need to say when they need to say it. And I'll wait and give you all time to do that, you know, and once I don't hear any more comment, we move to a motion because we have to move the meeting along. But please feel free that is our time to speak. It's always going to be public, but, you know, that's what we're here to do. So thank y'all for always speaking up. Okay, Nat.
So I didn't hear any obvious tweaks to this process, and I'm getting some east-west nods from people. So I'm going to move on to the next topic unless anybody sees a obvious change that we need to make. So the next thing we'd really like kind of to dig into with you is the motions that you have to consider. You've got a lot of things on your mind as you're going through the presentations and the staff report. And sometimes, as Britton illustrated tonight, there are multiple facets to your motion, perhaps, or your options. So would it be helpful to you to adjust the last slide in each staff presentation? For example, if the recommendation of the staff is to deny for purposes of not having enough information, or just deny because it doesn't meet the design guideline criteria 14.1, whatever the case may be, or if it's a motion to approve as recommended by staff, or a motion to approve as requested by the applicant, would your motions on the screen be helpful for you as you navigate through that decision-making process, or are there any tweaks that you would ask us to make for either the information we provide or the recommendations?
I think just in the interest of the Zoom format, if we could get the COA number on there, and it may usually be on there and I'm just not seeing it, but.
No, that would be new, but we can absolutely do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. That would be the only addition I'd make. What I do is I just write down the COA number on a piece of paper so that I can craft a motion in time, you know, to make it, because otherwise you're just hunting for it.
That is really helpful feedback. Thank y'all.
And, you know, Nat, I think in the delay, or I think we have, you know, delay, postpone was what Britton had on the slide tonight. You know, I will be completely honest, when I came on Harc, you know, I had been told that, oh, well, you know, you don't really want to postpone because that's just really like a denial. And I think we saw it. And so I've been hesitant to ever really talk about that. And we don't want to slow people down in the process, but we do want to make the right decision. And so I think tonight, the way we use postpone, that can be appropriate in certain circumstances. I don't know if Britton, you want to elaborate on that at all, or.
Well, I think tonight was a really good example of when that's a great tool to use. We don't use it very often. This is the first time that y'all have used it since I've been in this role. But I think it is fair and valid, and I believe is sometimes going to be necessary for y'all to say, I'm sorry, but we just don't have enough information. You are going to have to come back to us with additional information so that we can make a decision. And I think Commissioner Nunn, you had a very good point, which was that, you know, if we're going to approve something, we want what's being approved to be very clear and specific. And so that we understand what that approval looks like, so that you understand what that approval looks like and what that requires. And so I would not kind of frame a postponement as a denial at all, but rather saying we're just going to need more information in order to make this decision. And what we can do on a postponement, you know, we have to meet notification requirements to a certain extent. If you do have an item come forward in a meeting and you want to postpone, you have a couple of options under Robert's rules, but we already had tonight's case, for example, is already, we've already done notification for the 27th. And so that was accomplished. If you have one that comes forward just as a regular legislative item and staff has got everything where it needs to be, and it's all noticed appropriately, you can postpone, and you can say, I move to postpone until the next regular meeting, saying that we will pick this back up at that meeting, or I move to postpone until the meeting on September 30th or whatever day that is, to give the applicant sufficient time. And so I think if we had some dialogue and an applicant understood what they were expected to bring back, we could do that. It's always staff's role to assist the applicants, and so you do have some options there that I don't anticipate using very often, but it is a completely valid use of your role as commissioners to say, we're going to need more information, or this is what we would need to see to make a decision. What we don't want is for y'all to make a decision that you're not comfortable with, or that you don't feel that you have enough information to make, because that's not good for anybody. So that's where that comes in.
I would just add to, as Britton mentioned, so once you do have that public hearing, though, you do need to have that item come back to you in 35 days per the development code, unless the applicant is willing to extend that time. So part of the trickiness of your job, Chair, and the body is to have that dialogue with the applicant. If you feel like you're going towards the postponement route with them because you need more information, you can have that dialogue with the applicant. If they're not willing, then we do need to bring it back per the development code within 35 days. So thank you all for that feedback. I appreciate the opportunity to have a candid discussion with y'all and to get some of this work and continually improve our processes and product for the public. Britton and I are going to get back together and take a look at what you've shared with us. I've heard some really good things about, just to kind of give you a quick summary of what you guys have said, which is you gave some priorities on infill development, demo, Secretary of Interior standards, and review of past rulings and commercial or infill projects, and have these in short, small sessions. But if there are meaty topics, then perhaps we have a separate meeting for that. Also heard from you all about looking at the public comment and being ready to address those. I heard that conceptual reviews were of benefit to the commission, but making sure that it was clear what the outcomes of those were to be. I heard about letters of intent and that they do provide some value, but they vary based on the complexity or what the applicant's trying to achieve. Commissioner Brownard offered some kudos to the historical content, and you guys get to be insiders to some of that value Britton provides to our applicants on the case history. The staff presentation is the key component of the meeting for the evening. Add the COA number to the motion, and then we had a little bit of a discussion about the value that may be for the applicant or the commission in terms of delay or postponing that item. With y'all's permission, we'd like to come back to you in September with a list of short-term improvements, just to make sure that we've captured what you guys have given us some direction on.
Yeah, that sounds great, Nat. I think design guidelines, be sure we had with that Secretary of Standards, the new updates, and then the current design guidelines.
Absolutely.
Noah's on the telephone for a little bit, so I didn't weigh in, but I did want to just reiterate, Britton, I think you're amazing. Like, you're amazing. And Amanda, I think you're doing a great job as chair. So.
Thank you, Pam.
I really, 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 really love this job.
We know you do it. We see it.
Y'all just wait till the 27th. If you think the history's been good before, you're going to love it now.
We're excited. And I'd love to see us be able to get together for a workshop if there was a meatier topic, not only just to do a workshop, but just to really, I know that this isn't the time now. We're meeting virtually for a lot of reasons, but maybe in the new year, to be able to do that, just to get to be together, but also to learn some information. So anyway, anything else, Nat?
No, ma'am. If you're willing to move on to the next item, on updates.
Okay, so we are at item F, updates. So that's back to staff. Any updates?
We are thankful that Sophia is taking some time with family. She doesn't take a lot of time off. So she asked that I provide you an update on the design guidelines. We are very close to awarding a contract and getting a qualified firm on board. We're excited to introduce you to them once we've figured all that contracting out, which we hope maybe to get done next week. So look for that update coming forward to you, and then a schedule that we'll share with you and how we'll include you in the process. And then the city is wrapping up its budget process, and we'll be finishing that up, the special meetings in September, in advance of around the second week of September. That's really all I have for updates for y'all tonight. Are there any questions that you have of me or Britton?
Nat, the only question I would have is, are we continuing? I'm assuming we're just continuing virtually and just checking in on that.
Yeah, we're still operating under the assumption of virtual meetings for the foreseeable future.
Okay. And then last thing, as you know, I watched the city council workshop the other night, and Nat did a great job on the presentation of our neighborhood plans. Nat, do you want to give just a quick, you talked about that last meeting, just a quick update?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry, it slipped my mind. I did offer to Sophia I would give you an update on it. So commissioners, you know that there is a downtown master plan, and that master plan thinks about what we have on the ground today in downtown, but what we also want in the future. And when development occurs, it gives recommendations for how that development should happen, different than the guidelines that you use, which are about architectural design. The downtown master plan goes into things like transportation, pedestrian automobile circulation. It goes into sidewalk treatments and that support that. It goes into placement of parking. It covers things like signage. That is a small area plan. It gives discrete guidance for how development should occur in an area. And the council in July directed staff to work with the San Jose neighborhood, which is west of Maple, south of 15th, and this Track Ridge Grasshopper neighborhood, which is just west of our building and the library, which extends basically from the river along 2nd Street, Scenic to its west, MLK to its east, south past University, all the way down to 17th or 18th Street. We're still working with the neighborhood to define that, to come up with some plans based on what the neighborhood wants to see. Those things can range from transportation improvements to historical and cultural preservation. So we're looking forward to that. It can cover things like public improvements needed. So if there are sidewalks needed, or if there are bike lanes, or if there are parking issues that the neighborhood wants to address, it really can run the gamut. But it's very specific to those two neighborhoods. We will be canvassing, walking the streets of those neighborhoods the week of August 24th. And we are looking for people who want to get involved in that effort. We have a group of core stakeholders for both neighborhoods that we're talking with right now. But we're asking participation for anyone who wants to get involved with that. And we will have a meeting tomorrow with the San Jose neighborhood via Zoom to talk about the date of that canvassing. And then next week we'll meet with the TRG to talk about canvassing their neighborhood. And we have a survey that's very specific to the TRG about ranking the 6 issues that they've identified. But we're a little farther behind in our conversation with San Jose about what they want to see. So our conversation with San Jose is going to be more open and broad about what do they want, what are the issues they want addressed. And we'll be taking that survey information and actually creating a request for proposals so that we can select the right team to help us address these issues. And right now we're working through with council on what it's going to cost to do those plans. And we're going to make sure that we're reaching people where they're at. So we've got Spanish translation, we've got online survey, we've got door hangers, and we've got some surveys that we'll be walking the neighborhood with so people can complete them right then and there. So if you've got channels into either neighborhoods, you feel compelled as a commissioner that you want to participate in this, or as an individual, we welcome that too. Or if you have any questions about any of the studies I'm helping with the San Jose, there's a really cool, you guys may like it, it's called Recuerdos Mexicanos. It's a book that was published in 1991 through a grant. The city helped write it. It's in the county's museum. And then I was fortunate enough to get a copy today. And I'll be reading it on the beach this weekend, but Britton's got a copy. There's also a Histories of Pride, 13 Pioneers Who Shaped Georgetown's African American Community, which has information about the Track Ridge Grasshopper. So you guys want a copy of this, I'd be happy to shoot that to you, or the Recuerdos Mexicanos.
Thanks, Nat. Yeah, that, so happy to see these moving forward. There's been a lot of conversation for years around these, and, luckily, thanks to staff, things are now moving forward. So happy to see that happening. And I've seen both of those publications, and they are very interesting. So I'd encourage you to get that from Nat if he can so get it to you. Okay, anything else, Nat? You good? Okay. All right, I will thank you all so much for your input tonight. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn by Catherine and a second by Carolee. Motion approves. I'll take a vote just because. Amanda, approve. Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston.
Approve.
Commissioner Morales.
Approve.
Commissioner Nunn.
Approve.
And Commissioner McCabe.
Approve.
All right. Thank you all very much. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate you.
Have a great week.
Nice job.